The massive transport shuttle Endeavour docked at Kepler Station with a soft mechanical hiss that echoed through the arrival bay. Through the reinforced viewing windows, hundreds of alien students pressed their faces against the glass, their various appendages trembling with nervous excitement. Today marked a historic moment in the Academy's 300-year existence, the arrival of the first human exchange student. Emily Watson stepped off the shuttle with steady, confident movements that immediately caught the attention of every observer. She was shorter than most species represented at the station, standing barely 5.5 feet tall, but something about her presence commanded attention. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the standard Academy jumpsuit in navy blue, but what made the watching aliens whisper among themselves was the way she moved. Each step seemed calculated, purposeful, like a creature constantly aware of its surroundings. But what truly captured everyone's focus was the sleek environmental pod she carried under her left arm. The device was roughly the size of a small suitcase, made of brushed metal with a transparent viewing window on one side. Soft blue lights indicated the pod was active and maintaining its internal environment. Professor Thilaxe approached the new arrival, his 4 muscular arms spread wide in the traditional Molvac greeting gesture. His purple skin rippled with the complex patterns that indicated formal welcome among his species. "Dr. Watson," he said, his voice carrying the slight mechanical undertone of his translation device, "welcome to Kepler Station. We are deeply honored to host our first Terran researcher." Emily smiled broadly, revealing her white teeth in an expression that made several nearby students take involuntary steps backward. The gesture looked friendly enough, but many species in the galaxy considered the baring of teeth to be a threat display. "Thank you, Professor Thilaxe," she replied, her voice warm and clear. "I'm incredibly excited to begin my research here. The opportunity to study interspecies bonding behaviors in such a diverse academic environment is exactly what I hoped for." She shifted the environmental pod slightly, and something inside made a soft sound that caused every conversation in the arrival bay to stop instantly. The noise was low and rhythmic, almost like a tiny motor running, but with an organic quality that suggested something very much alive. Marcus, a young Vorthak student whose crystalline body was currently cycling through nervous shades of purple and blue, leaned closer to his study partner. The Vorthak were silicon-based life forms who communicated partially through color changes in their translucent skin, and right now Marcus was broadcasting pure anxiety. "Did you hear that sound?" he whispered to Arya, a graceful Zephyrian whose feathery silver appendages were trembling slightly. Arya nodded, her large dark eyes fixed on the environmental pod. The Zephyrians had evolved from prey species on their homeworld, and their instincts were finely tuned to detect potential threats. "The human brought something with her," she murmured back, her voice barely audible even with her translation device amplified. "Something alive. Something that makes sounds like. She couldn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. The sound had triggered something deep in both their species' survival instincts, something that screamed predator. Professor Thilaxe, either unaware of the growing tension among his students or choosing to ignore it, continued the welcoming ceremony. "Your research proposal was most intriguing, Dr. Watson. The concept of studying emotional bonds between species that evolved independently is groundbreaking work. I'm particularly interested in how different species might form connections despite having completely different evolutionary backgrounds," Emily explained, gently patting the side of her environmental pod. The gesture was clearly affectionate, which only made it more disturbing to the watching aliens. "I've brought along my research companion to help demonstrate some of the concepts I'll be exploring." The pod made that sound again, slightly louder this time, and Emily's smile grew even wider. "She's probably getting a little restless after the long journey," she said fondly. "I should get her settled into our quarters soon." Oliver, a nervous Chithrax whose compound eyes were perfectly designed to track fast-moving objects, had been studying Emily's movements since she stepped off the shuttle. The Chithrax were insectoid in appearance, with multiple arms and a natural ability to process information quickly. "Look at how she holds that container," he clicked to his companions in rapid Chithrax. "She's protecting it, but she's also comfortable with it. Whatever's inside, she's not afraid of it." "That might be the most terrifying part," replied James, another Chithrax whose wings buzzed anxiously. "Humans come from a death world. If she's not afraid of something, that means it's probably something that would kill the rest of us instantly." As Professor Thilaxe led Emily toward the residential sections of the station, the gathered students began to disperse, but their conversations were all focused on the same topic. What had the human brought with her? What kind of creature could survive in that small pod? And most importantly, why did the sound it made trigger such deep, primal fear in so many different species? Robert, a methodical Zephyrian with pale blue feathers, was already accessing the station's databases through his neural interface. "I'm going to research Earth's fauna," he announced to his friends. "If we're going to be sharing a station with a human and her research companion, we need to know what we're dealing with." As Emily disappeared around the corner, still carrying her mysterious pod, the alien students were left with more questions than answers. None of them could have imagined that their fears about harboring a deadly predator were both completely wrong and absolutely correct, depending entirely on one's perspective on the nature of friendship. 3 days had passed since Emily Watson's arrival, and the alien students at Kepler Station found themselves unable to concentrate on their studies. Every small sound in the corridors made them jump. Every glimpse of the human walking calmly to her classes filled them with growing unease. Marcus had drawn the unlucky assignment of quarters adjacent to the human's room on Deck 7. What he discovered there made his crystalline skin cycle through colors of deep anxiety every time he tried to sleep. Through the walls, which were designed to be soundproof for most species, he could hear movement that defied explanation. The sound started early each morning, just after the station's artificial dawn cycle began. First came light, rapid footsteps that seemed to move back and forth across the room in patterns that made no sense. The steps were too quick and too light to be the human's feet. Then came soft thumping noises, as if something was repeatedly throwing itself against furniture or walls. Sometimes the sounds would stop completely for long minutes, creating an eerie silence that was somehow worse than the activity. But most disturbing of all were the vocalizations. The creature made that same low, rumbling sound they had heard in the arrival bay, but now Marcus could hear variations in it. Sometimes it was quiet and steady, other times it rose and fell like some kind of primitive song. Occasionally, there were other sounds too, sharp and brief, that made Marcus's entire body vibrate with instinctive terror. "She's definitely training it," James whispered during their morning meal in the station's cafeteria. The Chithrax's compound eyes darted nervously around the room as he spoke. "I've been observing her daily routine. Every morning at exactly 0800 hours, she enters her quarters and speaks to the creature. I can hear her voice through the ventilation system." Arya leaned closer to the group, her silver feathers rustling with anxiety. "What does she say to it?" "I can't make out the words," James admitted, "but the tone is definitely commanding. Short phrases, repeated several times. Classic training behavior." He paused, his wings buzzing softly. "And the creature responds. It makes different sounds after she speaks, like it's acknowledging her commands." Oliver had been conducting his own investigation using his access to the station's engineering systems. As a Molvac student studying environmental sciences, he had legitimate reasons to monitor atmospheric conditions throughout the facility. What he discovered in Emily's quarters made his forearms shake uncontrollably. "The environmental readings are extremely concerning," he reported to the growing group of worried students. "Whatever she's keeping in there requires very specific atmospheric conditions. The oxygen levels in her room are maintained at exactly 21%, which matches Earth's atmosphere, but look at this." He projected a holographic display showing energy consumption data. "Her quarters are using 3 times more power than any other residential unit on the station." "Why would it need so much power?" Marcus asked, his crystalline structure flickering through rapid color changes. "Life support for a high-metabolism organism," Oliver explained grimly. "The power is going to temperature regulation, air filtration, and what appears to be some kind of specialized lighting system. This suggests a creature with very demanding survival requirements. In nature, that usually means one thing: apex predator." Robert had spent the past 2 days accessing every database available to Academy students, researching Earth's biological diversity. What he found kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his quarters and jumping at every small sound. The holographic files he had compiled painted a picture of a world so dangerous that most civilized species would classify it as uninhabitable. "Look at these creatures," he said, projecting images that made the entire group recoil in horror. A massive feline with orange and black stripes filled the display, its mouth open to reveal enormous fangs. "They call this a tiger. It can leap over 30 feet horizontally and has night vision capabilities that surpass most technological systems in the galaxy." The image changed to show a smaller but equally terrifying creature. "This is labeled as a domestic cat in their databases, but look at the description: natural-born hunter, equipped with retractable claws designed for gripping prey, teeth specialized for tearing flesh, and reflexes fast enough to catch flying objects mid-air." Lucy, a Vorthak student who specialized in behavioral psychology, had been monitoring the energy signatures from Emily's quarters using equipment borrowed from the physics department. Her findings added another layer of horror to their growing understanding of the situation. The patterns are definitely consistent with predatory behavior, she reported, her skin glowing pale yellow with fear. Every day, there are specific activity spikes that match classic hunting cycles. First, there's a period of low-level movement, which corresponds to stalking behavior. Then complete stillness for several minutes, followed by sudden, intense bursts of activity. What happens during the intense activity? Arya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Based on the energy readings, the creature moves at incredible speeds around the room, then there's impact signatures suggesting it's attacking something. After that, there's a period of what can only be described as feeding behavior. The group fell silent as the implications sank in. Daniel, who had been quietly listening while running calculations on his personal device, finally spoke up. I've been analyzing the waste disposal patterns from her quarters, he said quietly. The biological waste signatures indicate a purely carnivorous diet. Whatever that creature eats, it's not plant matter. How often does it need to feed? Marcus asked, dreading the answer. Based on the waste output and the frequency of the hunting behavior Lucy described, it appears to kill and consume prey multiple times per day. The alien students looked at each other with growing horror. They were sharing a space station with not just a human from a death world, but with an active, constantly hungry predator that seemed to require regular kills to survive. And somehow, the human had complete control over this killing machine, training it and commanding it like some kind of living weapon. None of them slept well that night. The group of terrified alien students had grown from the original 4 to nearly a dozen worried individuals from across the station. They met in secret in one of the abandoned storage rooms on Deck 3, away from the main corridors where Emily might overhear their discussions. What had started as casual concern had evolved into a full investigation that consumed their every waking moment. Robert had appointed himself as the primary researcher, spending countless hours in the Academy's vast digital libraries. The Zephyrian's pale blue feathers had grown noticeably duller from lack of sleep, but his determination to understand Earth's fauna had become an obsession. The holographic projector in the center of their makeshift meeting room displayed image after terrifying image as he presented his latest findings. I've discovered something disturbing about Earth's ecosystem, Robert began, his voice trembling as he manipulated the display. The entire planet appears to be designed around the concept of predation. Look at this creature they call a lion. The hologram showed a massive golden beast with a flowing mane and powerful jaws. It hunts in coordinated groups, using strategy and teamwork to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Marcus watched the display with growing horror, his crystalline skin cycling through deep purples and blacks. But surely the human wouldn't bring something that large aboard the station. That's what I thought initially, Robert continued, changing the image to something smaller but somehow even more frightening. But then I found these. They call them house cats, and according to the data, humans actually invite these creatures to live in their homes. The hologram showed a sleek, four-legged animal with sharp ears and gleaming eyes. Listen to this description from their biological databases: solitary hunters with retractable claws, enhanced night vision, and the ability to kill prey up to 8 times their own body weight. Oliver leaned forward, his 4 Molvac arms gesturing anxiously. 8 times their own body weight? That means if the creature weighs even 5 pounds, it could theoretically kill something weighing 40 pounds. Most of us weigh less than that, whispered Arya, her silver feathers rustling with fear. The data got worse as Robert continued his presentation. He had found video recordings from Earth showing these house cats in action, and the footage was like something from a horror movie. The creatures moved with liquid grace, their bodies perfectly designed for stealth and killing. They could leap incredible distances, climb vertical surfaces, and their reflexes were so fast that they could snatch flying objects out of the air without apparent effort. But here's the most disturbing part, Robert said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. According to multiple sources, humans don't just tolerate these predators. They actively seek them out. They bring them into their homes on purpose. There are billions of these creatures living alongside humans on Earth. Lucy had been conducting her own research using the behavioral analysis equipment from the psychology department. The Vorthax findings painted an even more frightening picture of what was happening in Emily's quarters. I've been monitoring the energy signatures continuously for the past week, she reported, projecting her own data onto the holographic display. The hunting patterns are becoming more regular and more intense. Every day at 0630, 1200, and 1800 hours, there's a spike in activity that lasts exactly 15 to 20 minutes. 3 times a day, Marcus calculated, his color shifting to alarmed orange. It needs to hunt 3 times every single day. The pattern is always the same, Lucy continued. First, there's a period of low-level movement lasting about 10 minutes. The creature appears to be searching or tracking something. Then complete stillness for 2 to 3 minutes, which matches stalking behavior in most predator species. Finally, there's an explosive burst of activity lasting 30 to 40 seconds, followed by what can only be feeding behavior. Daniel had been focusing on the waste management systems, and his discoveries added a biological dimension to their fears. The creature's metabolism is extraordinary, he reported. Based on waste output analysis, it processes nutrients at a rate consistent with a hypercarnivore. Everything it consumes appears to be pure protein and fat. No plant matter whatsoever. What about the sounds Marcus has been hearing? Asked James, his chithrax wings buzzing nervously. The vocalizations. I've recorded some of them through the ventilation system, Marcus replied, activating his personal recording device. The storage room filled with the low, rumbling sound they had first heard in the arrival bay. But now they could hear variations. Sometimes the rumbling was soft and steady, other times it rose and fell in pitch like some kind of primitive communication. It's definitely trying to communicate with the human, Oliver observed. But listen to this. Marcus played another recording, this one featuring sharp, brief sounds that made everyone in the room flinch. These vocalizations match the aggressive calls of Earth predators I found in the database. The most disturbing discovery came from Arya, who had been monitoring Emily's own behavior patterns. The human shows no fear whatsoever, she reported. I've observed her entering and leaving her quarters multiple times, and her stress indicators never change. Her heart rate stays steady, her movements remain calm, and she actually appears more relaxed after spending time with the creature. That's impossible, Lucy protested. No rational being could remain calm around an active predator. Unless, Robert said quietly, the human has complete control over it. What if she's trained it so thoroughly that it obeys her every command? What if it's not just a research companion, but a weapon? The thought sent chills through every member of the group. They began to imagine scenarios where Emily might use the creature against other students, or worse, where the creature might break free from her control and begin hunting throughout the station. Their research had revealed one terrifying truth. Whatever Emily Watson had brought aboard Kepler Station was a perfect killing machine, and somehow, she had made it completely loyal to her. A week had passed since Emily's arrival, and the alien students could no longer pretend everything was normal. Their grades were dropping as they struggled to focus on lectures while constantly listening for threatening sounds. Sleep came in brief, restless periods filled with nightmares about Earth's predators. The fear had spread beyond their original group, and now nearly 24 students from various species were involved in what they privately called their survival planning. The breaking point came during Professor Thilaxay's advanced xenobiology class. Emily had volunteered to give a presentation about human culture, specifically focusing on what she cheerfully called companion-animal relationships. To the terrified alien students, her presentation sounded like a detailed explanation of how humans had learned to control and weaponize Earth's most dangerous predators. The bond between humans and our companion animals represents thousands of years of evolutionary cooperation, Emily explained, standing confidently at the front of the classroom. Her presentation displayed images of various Earth creatures, each one more frightening than the last. Through a process we call domestication, we've formed partnerships with species that might otherwise be competitors or threats. Marcus felt his crystalline structure vibrate with fear as Emily showed an image of a large, muscular creature with powerful jaws. This is a dog, she said with obvious affection. Dogs were originally wolves, pack hunters with incredible intelligence and loyalty. Through selective breeding and training, humans have developed hundreds of different varieties, each specialized for different purposes. The alien students exchanged horrified glances. Selective breeding meant humans had been deliberately creating new types of predators for specific purposes. Training meant they had learned to control these creatures completely. My own research focuses on the emotional aspects of these relationships, Emily continued, advancing to the next slide. The bonds we form with companion animals aren't just practical partnerships. They're based on genuine affection, trust, and mutual care. She paused, smiling that terrifying human expression. In fact, I brought my own companion with me to demonstrate these concepts. Her name is Duchess, and she's been my research partner for 3 years. Arya nearly fell out of her seat. The creature had a name. Emily had been working with this predator for years, training it, forming what she called an emotional bond with it. The implications were staggering. After class ended, the group of students gathered in the corridor, their various forms of agitation clearly visible. Marcus's crystalline skin was cycling rapidly through colors of fear and determination, while James's chitinous wings buzzed with nervous energy. "We have to do something," Marcus declared, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that indicated serious resolve among his species. "She's clearly planning to use that creature in her research. We heard her say it ourselves. We could be the test subjects." "But how do we confront a human?" Oliver asked, his forearms gesturing anxiously. "Everything we've read suggests they're incredibly dangerous even without their trained predators." "She seems reasonable," Arya offered hesitantly. "Maybe if we approach this scientifically, present our concerns based on the data we've collected." "What if she sees that as a threat?" Lucy interrupted. "What if confronting her triggers some kind of defensive response? She might release the creature." The debate continued for nearly an hour, with students suggesting everything from contacting station security to requesting immediate transfer to other facilities. Finally, Robert stepped forward with a plan that seemed both reasonable and terrifying. "We approach her directly, but we do it in a public space where she can't use the creature against us," he proposed. "We present our research professionally, explain our concerns about station safety, and request that she contain the predator more securely." The group agreed, though none of them felt confident about the plan. They found Emily in the observation lounge during the evening rest period, sitting alone at a table near the large viewing ports. She was reading from a tablet while drinking something hot from a ceramic mug, looking completely relaxed and unguarded. The casual way she sat, as if she had no enemies in the universe, only made her seem more dangerous to the watching aliens. Marcus approached first, his crystalline skin flickering between diplomatic blue and nervous purple. "Dr. Watson," he began, his voice carefully modulated to sound official rather than accusatory. "We need to speak with you about a safety concern." Emily looked up from her tablet, her eyebrows rising in what appeared to be genuine surprise. "A safety concern? What's wrong?" Arya stepped forward, her silver feathers trembling slightly despite her efforts to appear calm. "It's about the predator you've brought aboard the station. We're concerned about the potential risks to other students." "I'm sorry," Emily said, setting down her mug and looking genuinely confused. "What predator are you talking about?" The question caught the alien students off guard. How could she not know what they were referring to? Marcus recovered first, his determination overriding his fear. "The creature in your quarters," he said more firmly. "We know it's there. We've heard it hunting. We've monitored the energy signatures. We've analyzed the biological data." His colors shifted to more aggressive yellows and oranges. "We know it's dangerous, Dr. Watson. The question is what you're planning to do with it." For a moment, Emily stared at them with what appeared to be complete bewilderment. Then, slowly, her expression changed. Her eyebrows lifted higher, her eyes widened slightly, and her mouth curved into that terrifying expression they had learned was called a smile. But this smile was different from the ones they had seen before. This one seemed to contain amusement, even delight, as if she had just heard something incredibly funny. "Oh," she said, and her voice carried a tone that made every alien in the group want to flee immediately. "You mean Duchess?" Emily's smile grew even wider as she looked at the group of terrified alien students clustered around her table. The expression that had frightened them for over a week now seemed somehow different, warmer, though they couldn't understand why. She closed her tablet and stood up slowly, her movements still carrying that fluid grace that had made them so nervous. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding," she said gently, her voice carrying none of the threat they had expected. "Why don't you all come with me? I'd like you to meet Duchess properly." The walk through the corridors of Kepler Station felt like a march towards certain doom for the alien students. They stayed clustered together, ready to scatter and run at the first sign of danger. Marcus's crystalline skin had turned a deep, fearful purple, while Arya's silver feathers were pressed flat against her body in the Zephyrian equivalent of terror. Oliver's forearms were positioned defensively, and James's compound eyes were tracking every shadow and movement around them. Emily seemed completely unaware of their fear as she led them through the residential section toward Deck 7. She chatted casually about the station's architecture and her impressions of the academy, as if she wasn't leading them toward a confrontation with a deadly predator. Her calm demeanor only made the situation more frightening to the aliens, who interpreted it as the confidence of someone who had complete control over a dangerous weapon. When they reached Emily's quarters, she paused at the door and turned to face the group of students. "Now, I should warn you," she said, and every alien took an involuntary step backward. "She might be a little shy at first. She's not used to meeting new species." The door slid open with a soft hiss, and immediately they could hear it. That low, rumbling sound that had haunted Marcus's dreams for a week filled the corridor. It was louder now, more intense, and seemed to be coming from multiple directions within the room. Several students began backing away from the doorway. "Don't be afraid," Emily said, noticing their retreat. "That sound means she's happy. She's been looking forward to having visitors." Happy? The aliens looked at each other in confusion and terror. How could such an obviously threatening sound indicate happiness? Was this some kind of psychological warfare technique that humans use to confuse their enemies? Emily walked into her quarters, and after a moment of hesitation, the alien students followed. The room was standard academy housing, with a bed, desk, and small living area. But what drew their attention immediately was the environmental pod, which was now open, sitting on the floor near the viewing window. "Duchess," Emily called softly, "we have guests." The rumbling sound grew louder, and then something emerged from behind the desk that made every alien in the room freeze in absolute shock. The creature was small. Much smaller than any of them had imagined. It stood barely a foot tall and perhaps 2 feet long, with a coat of orange and white fur that looked impossibly soft. It had large green eyes, pointed ears, and a long tail that swayed gently as it moved. As they watched in stunned silence, it approached Emily and began rubbing against her legs, the rumbling sound growing even more pronounced. "Everyone," Emily said, sitting down cross-legged on the floor as the tiny creature continued to rub against her, "I'd like you to meet Duchess. She's my cat." The word cat sent a chill through the alien students as they remembered Robert's terrifying research about Earth's house cats. But the creature in front of them bore no resemblance to the deadly predator they had imagined. This small, fluffy animal looked more like a living toy than a killing machine. "That sound she's making," Marcus whispered, still afraid to move, "the rumbling we've been hearing." "She's purring," Emily explained, gently stroking Duchess's fur. "Cats purr when they're content and happy. It's one of the ways they show affection." As if to demonstrate, Duchess closed her eyes and pressed closer to Emily, the purring becoming even more pronounced. Then Duchess did something that completely shattered every preconception the alien students had formed over the past week. She rolled onto her back, exposing her belly, and looked up at Emily with obvious trust and love. Her paws hung limply in the air, and she continued purring as Emily gently rubbed her stomach. "But our research," Robert stammered, his pale blue feathers ruffling with confusion. "The hunting behaviors, the predatory instincts, the energy signatures." Emily laughed, a sound that no longer seemed threatening at all. "Well, you're not wrong about cats being natural hunters," she admitted. "Duchess here is an expert stalker and pouncer. She's incredibly skilled at hunting her prey." She reached over to a small box beside her desk and pulled out what appeared to be a tiny gray object with a long tail. "Show them what you can do, Duchess." The moment Emily held up the small object, Duchess's entire demeanor changed. Her pupils dilated, her body crouched low, and her tail began twitching with focused intensity. Every sensor reading the aliens had recorded suddenly made perfect sense as they watched Duchess track the toy with laser-like concentration. Emily moved the toy mouse slightly, and Duchess pounced with lightning speed, capturing it in her paws and wrestling with it enthusiastically. Her movements were indeed those of a perfect predator, just as their research had indicated. But instead of tearing apart real prey, she was playing with a harmless toy. "She's not a trained killer," Emily explained as they all watched Duchess attack the toy mouse with adorable ferocity. "She's my companion. My friend. Humans have lived alongside cats for thousands of years. They chose to live with us, and we chose to care for them." Slowly, very carefully, Arya extended one trembling finger toward Duchess. The cat looked up from her toy, sniffed the offered digit curiously, then gently bumped her head against it. The purring started again immediately. "She likes you," Emily said softly. As Marcus watched this supposedly deadly predator roll over to request belly rubs from a complete stranger, he began to understand something profound about humans. Their greatest strength wasn't their ability to survive on a dangerous world, or their intelligence, or even their capacity for violence. It was their extraordinary ability to form connections across impossible barriers, turning natural enemies into beloved friends, and creating bonds of trust and affection that transcended every biological and evolutionary boundary in the universe.